This episode of the Peep Show podcast is sponsored by Quick and Dirty Media.
Are you an independent content creator, webcam model, or clip maker? Quick and Dirty Media can help you with your video editing and production needs at a reasonable price, allowing you to devote more time to creating your content. As a special offer for Peep Show podcast listeners, the first 5 content creators who submit a video for editing will receive their first order free. Make sure to use the promo code PeepShowPod. Find Quick and Dirty Media on Twitter at QuickDirtyMedia or send an email to info@quickanddirtymedia.com. Quick and Dirty Media is proud to be an adult-friendly business. Welcome to the Peep Show podcast.
News and stories from the sex industry.
With Jesse and PJ Sage. Welcome back to another episode of the Peep Show podcast. Today our guest is Tina Horn, a dominatrix, writer, educator, and podcaster. We talked to her about her new comic series, Safe Sex, the dystopian near future it envisions, and how it relates to recent events. We also discuss the craft of writing and the transferable skills developed through sex work.
Hey, I'm Adrian, one of the hosts of After Adult Podcast. My porn name should be Mozart Fremont, but you probably know me better by my actual porn name, Siri.
I'm Rachel, but my porn name would be Woody 16th Avenue.
After Adult is a podcast about life and porn.
I don't actually watch porn.
I don't really watch that much porn either. I probably watch more than you, but I mean, most of the time it kind of would feel like going to work on my day off.
You 100% watch more than me, because I don't watch porn. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for After Adult.
Or visit afteradult.com and follow us on Instagram at afteradult.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Peep Show podcast.
Welcome.
So today we have a very exciting interview for you. Tina Horn is on the show.
Yeah, I am so excited to talk to Tina. We wanted to have Tina on a long time ago, and so
basically since we started the podcast.
I know, I love Tina's show. I listen to it all the time, so it was fun to have another podcaster on.
It's true. And we got to nerd out about comics, right, Jesse?
I don't know anything about comics, but you did a really good job of covering for me.
Of nerding out for you. I bring the nerd to this podcast.
Yeah, I am not culturally literate at all when it comes to like...
Sorry, I love how you define comic books as culturally literate, but I'll take it.
Well, okay. I should say I don't know anything about pop culture. I know like a lot about a very small number of things and philosophy and sex work,
I was going to
politics.
say men that have died before the year 1900, white men.
Here's my scope of knowledge. I know a lot about philosophy. I know a lot about theology. I know a lot about sex work politics, and I know a lot about momming. And that's it. That's it.
All right. So that about wraps up this episode.
So, PJ, every time we have somebody on who's talking about, movies or television shows or comic books or Star Trek or anything, Or
the other 98% of the people we have. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
You're ready to deep dive into like the serious politics and the momming.
Yeah, I am. I actually really appreciate these episodes because I learned so much about things that I don't know anything about. And I mean, in fairness to me, and I've done some thinking about why I'm so out of it. And, I went to college and then I started having kids right away. I have an 18-year-old. I've been momming since then and like trying to scrape by and trying to make a living. And I haven't had a ton of time.
Sure, blame the kids.
I haven't had a ton of time.
I learn a lot about culture from our kids.
Well, but you listen to them when they talk. I'm busy, I don't know, making dinner and shit.
Right. trying to figure out like how to keep the
how to
lights
keep
on.
the house afloat.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
We were talking to Courtney Trouble, who works with us here at Peep Show, and
At Peep Show Media.
Peep Show Media, and they sent a text that had something to do with a TV show or something. I can't remember what now. And I said to them, I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And then I said, I don't know anything about pop culture. And they said, I know. I figured that out. So, yeah. I mean, now I'm embarrassed because I shared all of this. I'm not cool. You know, if some of you thought I was cool, I'm not.
I think you're cool.
Well, I may be on my own brand of cool.
You're your own person.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but it was great. It was great to talk to Tina because I learned a ton about about the medium of creating a comic book, because I didn't know anything about that, or the process of creating something that, you know, is really foreign to me. So it was really interesting.
Before we jump into our interview, though, we wanted to just talk for a second about some current events, sex work, politic-y stuff. Actually, that like bizarrely relates to the dystopian, futuristic context we're about to talk about in
Tina,
the interview.
Yeah,
with Tina.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk about the fact that in the last day or so, there was an article that was published in Pittsburgh that shows that there's evidence that Pittsburgh police are using facial recognition software to find and arrest Black Lives Matter protesters and activists.
And we should say that, like, I mean, yes, this is a story that's local to Pittsburgh, but actually the context of Pittsburgh is really has national implications, because we're like a tech hub here. Yeah. And Carnegie Mellon, one of the universities here in particular, is at the forefront of developing facial recognition and robotics and other things like that, and has a long history of having contracts for the police and the Defense Department. So in some ways, Pittsburgh is often sort of a testing ground for these new dystopic kind of technologies. The fact that we're seeing them be mobilized, in this way is alarming, and presumably has implications for the rest of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what PJ is talking about is the fact that coming out of CMU is a company called Marinus Analytic, and Marinus Analytic.
I mean, that's just one. That's
just one.
The one we've talked about and has been in the spotlight the most recently, but there's been many companies that have come out of CMU.
Yeah, but it's important to talk about them because they brand themselves as an anti-trafficking tech company, and what they did is they created software that scrapes escort ads for pictures and creates a huge database of sex workers, and then sells that software and the database to police forces.
Absolutely, it does that, but it not only does that, it also then scrapes like social media accounts, Twitter and Facebook and other things, and tries
to link those up
to make facial recognition matches between them, so that it essentially can out the escorts or sex workers pictured in those ads to police, so the police can kind of hunt them down and find them, all under the sort of
auspices of
the guise of sex trafficking. It's so obvious that technology can easily be weaponized against, all sex workers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And last year in Pittsburgh, PJ and I and some other sex work organizers in Pittsburgh disrupted a hackathon that a local university put on, because the founder and CEO of Marinus Analytic was the example and the keynote speaker for this event, where they were encouraging undergrads to hack systems in order to do things as wonderful as Marinus Analytic does.
Yeah, I mean, setting it up as an example of what they should be aspiring to. And so, of course, we tried to disrupt that hackathon to sort of say, well, hey, are you thinking about the consequences for sex workers and other marginalized populations of developing those technologies, asking the basic question of who's benefits from and who's hurt by these technologies. And so, we protested, we held up signs.
Well, we created a counter event too. Yeah. And so when we saw these headlines today, it was a little bit jarring, because my first thought was, we actually told everybody in the city that this is exactly what facial recognition software was going to be used for. It was going to be used by police to target and arrest marginalized people, which, we were saying that was the future implication of what this software could be used for. And then that actually is how it's being used. And so
I think the message here is listen to sex workers. And certainly we're not the only ones who are doing this important work. I mean, Hacking Hustling in particular is, really doing this work on a national scale. But it goes to show that there's, really an important need for solidarity among, marginalized groups, who are often intersecting anyways, because, when these technologies are developed to target one group, they're almost inevitably repackaged and redesigned to also target other marginalized groups. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a takeaway from this. I'm just actually kind of horrified, not surprised, but horrified if you can hold those things together at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I have, I guess, somewhat of a takeaway.
Yeah.
More of a personal thing, but, my background is sort of in sociology of technology. And I kind of, got into doing sex work as a student to afford being a student or try to afford being a student. But, this is something that I've been thinking about for a long time. And, I look back and I think, when I was younger, I was a little bit more optimistic about these technologies and not just the technologies, but our ability to converse with designers and to have these conversations about inequalities and about risk and danger. And I have to say that, I am just less and less confident that that's possible.
Yeah.
Actually, I kind of regret some of that kind of engagement. And I think that, looking now and sort of listening to BLM and, seeing, being a sex worker, being part of a movement, seeing how these technologies have played out, over the last 5 or 7 years, I feel like, all that we can really do, is try to be vigilant and try to resist, these
hyper surveillance.
Yeah. And as soon as we see these new technologies being developed, try to delay them and resist their implementation, as much as possible, because I think I was naive, when I was younger and maybe blinded by privilege.
Yeah, I mean, there's that mantra that how do they say this in tech circles, that no tech is bad, it's just implementation that's bad.
Right,
and...
or the idea that all tech is neutral or something like that.
Right.
It's the same idea as guns don't kill people, people kill people,
Right.
But the truth is, as we all know, there's a big difference between holding a gun and a stick in your hand, right?
Yeah.
And once you have a gun in your hand, your potential lethality is much greater. And if you, give guns to people with bad politics, they're going to enact their bad politics with violence, right? That's just inevitable. And I think that's the same thing with facial recognition technologies. It's the same thing even with just social media and social media scraping and social media data. So, my takeaway from this is that we just need to be ever more vigilant and more quick to resist these technologies in the early stages, because time and again we see that, if they can be used for, the purposes of oppressing marginalized groups, then they will be.
Yeah. And my takeaway is simpler than that. Y'all should listen to sex workers. Sex workers said this was going to happen, and it fucking happened. That's it.
All right. Well, on that note, let's talk about near future dystopias.
Yeah. Actually, though, one of the things that I did want to say that is unrelated to near future dystopia is that we had our first Peep Show live event yesterday, actually, and we're going to be putting it out as a bonus episode. And it was really great. We had Rooster and Dominique Riston and Spooky Fat Brat and Gwenadora on. And
the topic was DIY porn.
Yeah. And actually, one of the things that stood out to me is is, we were talking about it in a much different way than we were having this conversation about surveillance. But one of the things that came up was the fact that once you enter into online sex work and have your picture associated with sex work accounts, that's something that can't be undone. And I think that once all of us who are sex workers, all of us who have our identities and profiles wrapped up in this identity, like, just know so innately why these sorts of technologies can be harmful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so look out for that. But now I think we should just get to Tina Horn.
Okay, let's do it. Here at the Peep Show podcast, we talk a lot about supporting sex workers. And one way you can support sex workers is by paying for your porn.
In the spirit of Pride Month, why not take this opportunity to support a trans-owned and operated queer porn collective? Trouble Films offers a wealth of different kinds of porn and erotica. We love it, and we know you will too. Go visit them and check out their films on troublefilms.com or on sites like pinklabel.tv or Hot Movies. Tina Horn hosts and produces the long-running kink podcast, Why Are People Into That? She is also the creator and writer of a sci-fi sex rebel comic book series, Safe Sex. Her reporting on sexual subcultures and politics has appeared in Rolling Stone, Playboy, Hazlitt, Glamour, Jezebel, and elsewhere, and she's also the author of 2 nonfiction books and has contributed to numerous anthologies, including the queer horror collection Theater of Terror and the feminist essay collection Believe Me, How Trusting Women Can Change the World. Tina has also lectured on sex work politics and queer BDSM identities at universities and community centers all over North America and works as an on-set consultant for theater and television, including the dominatrix scenes of Pose. She is a Lambda Literary Fellow, the recipient of 2 Feminist Porn Awards, and holds an MFA in creative nonfiction writing from Sarah Lawrence. Tina's currently working on her first script for film and television, and you can follow her on Twitter and Instagram at Tina Horn's Ass. So, hi, welcome.
Hi, it's so good to be here.
I know. We've been talking about having you on the podcast, I don't know, for a year or so.
Yeah, maybe more.
Probably. It's
more.
been a really long time. Yeah. And then we went on hiatus for a little while, and we are back. So we're glad to have you finally here.
Thank you. I'm glad you're back. I love the show.
Thank you. I love your show.
Oh, great.
I'm a fan of your
fantastic.
show. How long have you been running it?
Oh God, going on 7 years.
Oh,
I feel like I
wow.
do that thing where as soon as it becomes, I mean, I guess maybe people do this with birthdays too, where when it hits the 5-year mark, I just immediately start saying, going on 6 years, but then I'm saying that for a year, and then I can't remember if it's been 6 years or is about to be 6 years. Anyway,
It's just
been a long
5 years
time,
plus.
and I am proud of the fact that I have been doing it, producing and hosting Why Are People Into That totally indie and consistently with listen, there's no shame in taking a hiatus if you need to, but it's sort of been like a stalwart project for me, with a lot of fucking ups and downs in my life and the planet, and so yeah, it's been a while.
So if you started that long ago, you started before podcasts were really popular in the way that they are now.
I think so. I've definitely, I mean, I don't want to say I was on the vanguard of podcasts or anything, but I have been doing radio really my whole life. I mean, I literally spent my childhood sitting with a boombox, dubbing songs off the radio.
Oh my God,
and then,
I did that too.
Recording myself as if it was my radio show, and then I would have when my friends would come over to hang out, I would be you're a guest on my radio show, and if once I ran out of friends, I was talking to my family members, and I was listen, you have to do this, you have to be a guest.
Okay, I didn't go that far, but
That's so cute.
it's pretty fucking cute.
It's really cute.
And then I did I had a punk show on college radio, and I've always loved audio, and then it seemed like a really, I guess it was 2014, maybe 2013, 2014 that I started working on it. And it just seemed like like all of my favorite shows to listen to are freewheeling conversation shows about culture and, to put it as broadly as possible. And so I just kind of wanted to like make the kind of show that I like to listen to. And the thing that is like really great about doing Why Are People Into That is that it's totally my thing. I don't answer to an editor. I don't answer to a producer, but like I have a new guest every episode. So it's always a collaboration.
Right.
And that keeps me from becoming like a control freak narcissist, but it's also like a nice, I mean, I think a little bit, it tempers it anyway, but then it also like, keeps me, when I am doing like other projects, in other mediums, and I am working with other human beings who have like sometimes different opinions than me, which can be great and can be frustrating, as we all know, and can be sometimes really like maddening and heartbreaking. And so no matter what I'm going through and with like other gigs or other jobs or other projects, I always have Wire People Into That to come back to be like, nobody fucking tells me what I can and can't say and what is and isn't interesting, and like people are gonna listen to it or not, or they could like skip to the next episode. But and then being able to see that like so many thousands of people listen to it every week and have consistently over time, and like having had so many conversations with people who listen, because sometimes I forget. I like broadcast it and put it out there and like forget that people are listening.
I feel that. I totally feel like that.
Yeah. Do you have that experience with?
Yeah, and I also have the experience of people coming, like meeting me in real life and saying like, and feeling like I'm very familiar because they listen to our voices and I don't know them at all. And having
radio is a very intimate medium.
Yeah, and I think people feel like this like strong connection to voices that they listen to. And so that's really interesting, because I guess it's not the exact same thing as what you're saying, but I feel like we forget how much we broadcast out into the world and that people consume that. Sometimes I think it feels like PJ and I are just talking to our friends. And
I mean, that's also true.
Yeah, I mean, we are. And the people that we want to talk to and we find interesting. So,
I mean, who knew in the 90s that all these punk kids with tape recorders were going to like wind up creating their own NPR on the internet,
Yes, and we have way more vocal fry, and we're proud. We're proud of it.
More likes and more vocal fry.
Yes. Oh my God, the likes. I once had this woman. I've told this story before. I once did a live show at this like. This happens to me occasionally, where folks who are putting on some kind of sexy event. Sometimes they're swingers events, which is like not so much my subculture, but like you do, you guys, fabulous. You have money to like pay me to bring me in to like talk about stuff. Wonderful. And sometimes, kink and leather communities or sex work organizations or whatever, or sometimes like universities or like bookstores or community centers will like bring me in to do a talk. On a lot of the time it's like, it's cool, because then I'm not just talking to my friends, I'm like connecting with broader communities and seeing like what their issues and their questions and concerns are, and also like what's universal. And anyway, I got brought to kind of like the middle of nowhere, kind of near Austin, Texas, for this like camping swinger event to like do a live Wire People Into That and like teach some workshops. And I love camping and I love being outside and I love like going to new weird places. And so if I can like do my thing in exchange for having those experiences and like bring my boo with me, then I'm like, cool, like let's like have an exciting adventure and eat like the best barbecue in the world. But anyway, so I did this event at this place in Texas, and I don't know if it was because it was Texas or if it was because they were swingers, but this lady came up to me. And by the way, my hosts were wonderful. And if they're listening, thank you so much for having me. It was a great experience. But this one lady came up to me with a notepad after the event and and showed me, and she had been making like hash marks, on her
Oh my God, I know where this is
notebook.
going.
And she said,
Oh my gosh.
"This is all the times that you said like in your 2-hour presentation."
Who cares?
Oh,
Who
wow.
cares?
And truly, who cares? But I'm very proud of myself. Again, maybe it was because I was in Texas and I was feeling a little sassy, but I was like, please, I am a Californian. Please do not insult my cultural heritage.
Yes. I love it.
Yeah, me too.
Anyway.
I had a similar experience. I wrote a piece for the Washington Post, and some guy who read it, I think about sex work, I think he was pissed that like a woman would write a piece about sex work or something, saw that
Shocking.
I host this podcast and went and listened to it, and then sent me an email that was really nasty where he put like every other word and made fun of my diction.
Anne Friedman and Aminatu So, who do the podcast Call Your Girlfriend, which is
Right.
a great
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
I've heard them say this many times, and I'm sure I've repeated it many times. They get this same flack from people,
Right.
about how they speak, and I've heard them say before that when someone criticizes the way you talk, they're actually criticizing what you're saying.
Right.
But they're like hiding behind something that they think is like an objective reality that that no one is going to be able to argue with. Like,
yeah, and I think they're also trying to discredit you. Like, I felt like what he was
Exactly.
saying is, you're a bimbo.
Right. I don't have
And
to
it's like,
engage with what
like,
you're
hell
actually
yeah.
saying. Yeah.
I don't have to engage with you.
I mean, it's like the same thing as just being like, well, you're wearing a low-cut shirt, so nothing you say
Totally.
matters, right? I mean, it's the like
Totally.
verbal equivalent of that.
right.
That's absolutely right.
Man, though, I can't imagine having the audacity to take notes on things like that and come and show you.
It's sad and it's hateful, and it's also like it's classist, and it is it's also like she's just jealous that I was the one with the microphone,
Right.
and that I had a lot of interesting, funny things to say, and that I'm so charismatic, and felt like, why does she get to have it all? I should cut her down to size. Or like some miserable people like won't be satisfied until they like think
Right.
that they've made everyone else as miserable as them. That is how I feel about that. Anyway, how are you guys doing?
Yeah, we're good. I think this is this is just what it's like to be a woman with a public career, I think.
It's true.
Yeah. Not
Yeah.
supposed to be talking, I don't think.
No.
Yeah, so your comic book. Let's talk about your
Yeah,
comic
I
book.
mean, there's literally like we could probably do 8 different podcast episodes right now. Just reading off that bio and knowing all of the work that you do. But mainly, we wanted to have you come and talk about the comic.
Yeah, hell yeah. I'm ready to do it.
Yeah.
And, so
What do you want to know?
Well, we've been following. I mean, we kind of talked, as it was in process, and we were looking forward to having you on. And I think like where I'd like to start. Let's start with. Can you give any unfamiliar listeners maybe like the brief synopsis so they know the arc of the story?
Totally. So safe sex, which you can pronounce it out loud as safe sex, or you can pronounce SFSX. We tend to write it SFSX because it's shorter and has better SEO. That's
Right.
the reason.
It's also more
it's really hard. Yes,
I keep coming back
thank you.
to
that. But it also is like really hard to say out loud. So
Right.
it's a little bit of a conundrum, but yeah. So Safe Sex is a science fiction comic book series that I created and wrote. it's had a bunch of different artists working on it, and the artist that is kind of the set series artist now is named Jen Hickman. And I've been working on it for 3 years. It came out in like single issue monthly comic book form starting in September 2019 through March 2020. What a month.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we managed to get all of the issues out before the pandemic changed everything, and including comics distribution and sales for sure. So I'm grateful for that. And
Wow. Yeah.
and now it has just been, so it's published by Image Comics, which is very exciting for me because Image is a publisher that I have loved for many years, and still my like favorite comics that I read these days are Image Comics. Yeah, awesome. What are some of your favorite?
Well, I was like a big Gen 13 nerd when I was a kid. Like that's how
cool.
I learned to draw, was copying Gen 13. So
oh my god, that's so sweet.
I know, dorky. Anyways, let's just skip right on over that detail.
Sure.
Jesse is like, are they speaking English right
yeah,
now?
I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
I did just reveal that I like had my friends as my like radio guests.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, fair enough.
In the 90s. So and now actually 2 days ago, Image put out the first trade paperback collection of Safe Sex. So for comics newbies, essentially what that means is that the first 7 issues that have been released already are now collected in a volume that is, looks more like a book or a graphic novel. And it's called Safe Sex Volume 1 Protection. Protection is like the name of the arc. It's kind of like if you think about like a series of television, right? It's like a whole story unto itself, but it's in a world that can and will continue like after this particular collection, or these 7 episodes, if you will. And so Safe Sex is a not too distant future dystopia about an America, and it specifically takes place in San Francisco for very intentional reasons, that has been totally taken over by this sort of religious right Christian conservative government organization called the Party. And the Party has implemented a bunch of different dystopian changes to San Francisco as we know it today. And one of those is everybody being required to file paperwork every time they have sex or experience pleasure, extreme surveillance and policing, these bureaucratic hellhole Kafkaesque centers, like one called the Pleasure Center, and absolutely like bureaucratizing and policing any kind of sexual deviance or perceived sexual deviance out of existence. So that includes queerness, especially transness. It includes sex work of all kinds. It includes, public sexual expression and like sex culture and sex subcultures. And so as the story starts, we start in this kind of like underground sex rebel club called the Dirty Mind, which is like a brothel and a porn studio and a porn theater and an archive and library of sex culture and a dungeon and also like a queer party space. And it's just kind of like the utopia within the dystopia.
Right.
And so there's this, it's not a spoiler to say that basically the first thing that happens in the story is that there's a big police raid by the Party on the Dirty Mind, and lots of police brutality and arrests are made, and it's a weird passive construction. The police arrest people, and our main character Avery, who is a pornographer, queer pornographer, part of the Dirty Mind, basically panics and grabs her boyfriend George and is like, we got to bail. We got to get out of here. I don't want to get arrested. I don't want to be next. Like, I'm tired of fighting. Like, let's go. And then the rest of the story is kind of like Avery's attempt to try to assimilate to this new world and kind of deal with like having this like passing privilege now as a result of marrying George in like a big creepy mass wedding that the party implements, and just like doing a really bad job of like trying to be normal,
Right.
and then also trying to reconcile with the fact that she totally bailed on her friends who are all still like trying to rebuild the Dirty Mind and try to survive, and and then like a bunch of inciting incidents happen and shit goes down, and a bunch of thrilling action adventure shit happens, and there's a lot of explicit sex and a lot of really scary horror and a lot of like political subtext and not too subtle political subtext, agenda and and a lot of like pretty pictures, and and to find out more, I guess you gotta pick up Safe Sex Volume 1 Protection, available now wherever books or comic books are sold. How was that?
That was really impressive.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. Were you going to ask something?
Well, I think we were going to ask the same thing, so go for it.
Oh, wow, you read my mind. No, I was curious, like, what motivated you to write it? Have you written comic books before, or was this a new endeavor?
That is what I was going to ask.
Was it really?
Yes. Sorry.
Sorry.
No, it's all good.
Welcome to our awkward relationship.
No, it's beautiful. I was also just thinking that it's nice to be on a sex work show, like, as opposed to like a comics show, which is great. I love doing more like general press, but it's also kind of nice to be like, oh yeah, I can like make the joke, like, I wonder where I learned to market myself so shamelessly. But yeah, no, I mean, to answer your question, I actually, this is my first comic book. It's also my first time writing fiction.
Oh, wow.
And I've written some erotica, some published some like short stories and like erotica anthologies. My career has been primarily nonfiction. And so, an editor who had listened to Why Are People Into That reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to develop a comic. And I was like, are you going to pay me? And and he said yes. And so I was like, cool, let's do it. And, I'm again,
a
like,
sex worker.
You know how it is. Exactly. And
that's how that conversation is supposed to go.
Exactly. It really was one of the better ones. And so like, but I am a lifelong fan of comics and also like genre fiction in general across mediums.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot for me to learn about the craft and definitely also about the business. But when it came to like I guess you could say like the enthusiasm for the form, I was like all in. And then like, I think that something that gave me like a little bit of an edge was first of all, we can definitely talk about the edge that sex work has given me
right.
in being a comics creator, but also like the thing that I'm the biggest fan of entertainment wise is like supernatural allegory. So I feel like I have a very finely honed sense of how to like take something that is very important to me, that is real, like say sex worker rights,
right? Mm-hmm.
and figure out, okay, what, like, where in this is the monstrosity, where is this in the, or where in this is monstrosity, where in this is putting a team together, where in this is suspense and special skills and perseverance and horror and also like sex and love and friendship and all those things that stories are supposed to be about, so I think that kind of came naturally to me. And then, as I have said many times at this point, I really do think that like being a professional dominatrix as well as being full-time real life kinky pervert and also like a professional pornographer and also just like a deeply, as I said, like deeply like perverted fan of porn. That's like another place where like allegories work really well, and you have kind of a chance to like figure out where's the power in the situation, where's the beauty, where's the ugliness, where's the rising action, where's the climax, like and like what do people really want and what do people really think when they think that no one's looking, and I think that all of that like served me really well in writing fiction, so I feel really stoked on it.
What were the challenges of moving over into fiction?
I think that you have to come up with everything yourself.
You have to generate it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas like with, Jesse, you and I do a lot of similar kinds of journalism where it's like, we're bringing our unique voice and point of view to like writing profiles of other people or even like, telling the story of an event or a movement or a phenomenon or like something that's happening. Right. So the skill with that is, like trying to build like real life is the raw material there. Right. And like real life is still the raw material with writing fiction, but like, you get the chance to to a certain degree, it's a little bit of like you're playing with your toys and you're like playing pretend and you're like using your imagination to like set up scenarios, making role plays. But like, I think that the biggest, a challenge that comes to mind for me is like the trick of inventing something, but then kind of tricking yourself into like forgetting that what happens in the end, or that you kind of like a note that I got when I was really just first starting was like that my characters were like getting to their goals too quickly, and it was like, well, yeah, that's because like I know the answer to the mystery.
Right.
And so I'm like guiding as this like, sort of like omnipotent like God. I'm like guiding my characters like towards their goal. And I'm like, here it is.
Yeah.
And so kind of like built like learning to, I guess,
to kind of hold back or something.
What's that?
To kind of hold back and let things evolve a little more slowly.
Right. And like, again, talking to you guys, I'm realizing that I can blatantly make a sex metaphor, which is that when you're first starting out, like being sexual with like your first sexual experiences, you're just like, oh my God, everything is like so great. And I just like want to get like, okay. And now like, I'm coming and like, can we do it again? And then like, hopefully as you get older and as you like deepen relationships like with yourself and others, and especially if you make art or your livelihood from sexuality, you learn to edge, basically. So I guess that's like you learn like the benefits of intrigue, mystery, tease and denial, and tension, right? Like the more that you can build tension, it's actually the pleasures are more satisfying overall, right? So so I think that even though you would think that I would like bring that experience and talent to whatever I do, I confess I think I kind of was like rushing to the finish line like a teenager who's just like, I just like, I'll come now and then I'll come again. It's like, no, like what if you really want to like keep people, you might want to think about how to like
teasing and seduction and
exactly seduction. Yes, exactly.
I think it's interesting that you say that, because I was thinking about my own writing, and I don't write fiction, but I was thinking that often I actually don't know where I'm going to go with something until I sit down and start. Like, I've had editors say like, okay, well, what's your take going to be on this? And I'm like, I don't know yet. I want to talk.
That is it's so annoying. When you're reporting, it's like, why don't you let me go there without a confirmation bias,
right.
And then I'll tell you when I write it based on what I discover with an open mind.
Because I don't know where things are going to go, and I don't know how my thinking is going to evolve about a thing until I sit down and actually like work with it. And then it's like, it's actually for me, I think through the process of writing is how like I discover my own thoughts, and not the other way around. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's interesting to hear you say that, like, I wouldn't have anticipated, I guess, that you had an idea of like what the ending is going to be like when you went into it.
Well, that's actually, that is something, I mean, I hope that this is interesting to you guys and your listeners, but like a lot of the time I can be a very, my like first drafts, I really like to sort of like get sloppy and play around and free associate in general, like in my writing. And kind of like what we were talking about with my podcast, I kind of like to show my work and like leave the whole sort of like messy thoughts and tangents like out there, because I find those interesting as an audience, as a listener, as a reader. But with comics, I got guidance from my first editor to write the outline of the whole arc that is now collected in this trade paperback Protection, to like write the whole arc before I started writing the individual issues.
Mm-hmm.
And also before I started writing the scripts, because I you write scripts when you write comics. And I'd never written a script before, although I've started to do some TV writing now. And like, he was very insistent on me outlining every page before I started writing the script, and also knowing what happened in like literally every panel before I started really like digging into writing it.
I mean, I guess they don't want you to write yourself into a hole. That was actually
so freeing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it also is like with writing comics, because there's the structure of panels, and also I think this is partially because it is episodic. You
that's what I was
need
thinking.
To think about things. Like, I just did an event with Carmen Maria Machado, who also has just started writing comics after writing prose, and we were like comparing notes about like getting used to things about like when you're writing a comic, you need to make sure that there is a reveal on the page turn, like on the left page, because
interesting.
Like even if you are like reading sequentially, like when you turn a page in a comic, you can see what's happening on the other page, and if it's a huge shock or surprise or reveal, or even just like something deeply emotional, then it kind of spoils it before the like tension moment where you're supposed to get there. So there's stuff like that, and then definitely with like writing 22 page single issue comics that are released once a month, you also do have to really think about stuff like pacing and cliffhangers, and also like integrating exposition, because in some cases it's going to have been like a month since people read the last issue. So, you kind of want to be thinking about stuff like that. But that did not feel limiting to me. I mean, it's kind of a corny comparison, but it's kind of like that thing where we know that bondage can like make you feel more free than anything, right? That like bondage is liberation. And like, you know, I think that that's true with structure.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you can have a lot of like creativity
well.
within constraint.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Or it's like a BDSM scene where when you've negotiated it, you've shared, you know, if it's you and one other partner or client, you know what desires are on the table, you know what boundaries are on the table, you know where those desires and boundaries overlap and where they don't. And you know, you have a yes, no, maybe, you have a general sense of the scene. And then from there, you can improvise, you can go really deep, you know, you can go to whatever kind of place you want to go to together because you've created that structure together. And like, I feel that is, it's definitely true with comics, and comics is an example of a very collaborative medium, which for the most part, my experience with that has been really, really great. Where like, I mean, I am not a visual artist. And so like being able to work with visual artists who can take my general, like, oh, I kind of want this, but more like this. And can you make it purple? You know, and then they just like bring it to life. And it's like, it's such a beautiful thing, but it also feels like a symbiotic relationship where you need one another. So that's a really nice feeling.
Now is a good time to hit the pause button and head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/peepshowpodcast. Even $1 a month shows us that you care and want to see Peep Show continue to thrive. Also, you can help increase our reach with a review on iTunes. I think that's so interesting about visual artists. I was actually talking to my friend today who's a tattoo artist, who's done a lot of my tattoos and PJ's tattoos. And
oh, cool.
Yeah. And I was telling her that we were just chatting, and I was saying that I'm not a visual person at all. And so I'll say to her, I want you to do an open fan, and actually have no idea in my head like what that's going to look like. And then she presents me with something that's 1,000,000 times better than whatever I was half imagining in my head. Yeah. And I'm like, how does she do that? I you know, and
talking to a tattoo artist is a really good comparison to what it is like to communicate with my artist, like as the comic book writer, like working with the visual artist.
Because when you make tattoos, like, when you want to have tattoos too, you have an idea of like what you're trying to communicate with that, especially since it's something that's going to be on your body for such a long period, forever, you know? And so
totally.
I think, to then say, I have this idea of something that I want. Can you realize that for me? And then to have them do something that's better than what you've imagined. I like that sort of collaboration.
That's actually another big challenge for me, is that I'm completely like, I'm such like an abstract conceptual person, and it's totally the tattoo thing is such a good comparison. I'm going to use that now, because I'm absolutely somebody who would talk to a tattoo artist and be like, I want it to kind of like feel like jazzy, you know?
Yeah, that's what I'm like too.
That's not a visual cue. So I've had to learn to think visually and to think about aesthetics and to think about fashion too, which is not, anyone who knows me will know I don't give that a lot of thought. I like have a Pinterest for the first time, and I've started to train myself actually to like even obviously in quarantine, there's a lot of rewatching of old faves going on, and like I'm much more likely now than ever before in my life to, even if I'm rewatching a movie that I really love and have seen 1,000,000 times and used to have on VHS, like Boogie Nights, like which we recently rewatched, which really holds up, by the way.
I haven't seen that in years.
Okay, we can talk about Boogie Nights, but like what I was gonna say is that like there were all of these moments where I either was like noticing something that was happening in the storytelling dynamics, like the suspense and tension, like what we were talking about before, or like a visual moment that I'm like, oh, I kind of took for granted how much what was happening in the scene. Like if I described the scene to you, I would have described the movement, the emotion, even
Right.
something like the performances are so, Julianne Moore and Heather Graham are it's such an amazing performance in the scene, but so much of how that's being achieved is through editing, through their outfits, through the room that they're in, through the lighting, right? And that's like all stuff that was affecting me, but I didn't have like an eye for it before. And so I'm trying to develop an eye for it
Yeah.
a little bit better.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So like the process of writing this changed the way you relate to the world, it sounds like, a little bit.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's been nice.
Yeah.
Turning back to the plot for a second, one thing
Yes.
that, there are, we talked about how it's dystopian and, there are these kind of, there are some Handmaid's Tale vibes, there's some 1984 vibes. But one thing that really stood out to me as like very unique is the way that the sort of dystopian entity, the party, marries like the ideologies and rhetoric of both radical feminism and sort of religious conservatism. And I wanted to ask you about like how you came to that decision and how that took root.
Such an awesome question. And there's also definitely like sort of like same-sex marriage gaze in there as well as like the sort of like turncoats that end up aligning queer people or gay people who like end up like aligning with the party and kind of having like a Faustian bargain of okay, we'll like tolerate you as long as there's enough like respectability politics to your identity and you're like promising us you're like basically straight, you just like happen to be to have same-sex attraction, you want to get married and you want to have like a 401k and a
Right.
picket fence and make babies and all of that. So yeah, I mean the like big bads, if you will, of this first arc are Mrs. Borman, who is definitely a second wave feminist, a turfy, swarfy feminist. And then Dr. Powell, who is the kind of like, like same-sex marriage respectability politics, like cis, upper middle class, white, gay male. And I really wanted to tell the story of, and this is a very good example of something where I'm taking something that I know from my life and I observe in my nonfiction work and I try to write about in my nonfiction work and then kind of putting it in this like sci-fi allegory in order to explore it and in order to send a message of how I feel about that kind of behavior and that phenomenon of like people who could be your allies,
right?
Like allying with your enemy. And it in some ways it's an allegory, and in some ways it's just like straight up like a literal fact, like that people like Mrs. Borman, the character from this comic, and Dr. Powell, representing a certain kind of privileged gay man and a certain kind of white feminism,
Right,
align themselves with like family values, religious conservatives, and in that process, like in order to define themselves as like kind of getting a pass or like assimilating or integrating, like they're like slightly like more to the left, like politics or identity or like political aims, with powerful conservatives, by saying like we're not like these perverts, right?
right,
Right.
We're gonna like further disenfranchise sex workers, queer people, especially trans people, kinky people, leather people, sluts, polyamorous people, like especially people who are out and loud and proud in public, like creating culture and community, like from these identities. Like we are going to surveil and police and oppress that
Right.
out of existence, like in order to like gain favor. And yeah, it's real, it's fucked. It terrifies me. I
Yeah.
don't understand it. It makes me really mad. And so I just kind of like poured all of my emotions about that into like constructing these villains. And I mean, then it also kind of makes it satisfying because you can kind of like expose their hypocrisy
Right.
a little
Right.
bit by writing their dialogue and writing from their perspective. But then the other part of that is so interesting about being a fiction writer is that I mean, it is for me anyway, like something that's really important to me is having compassion for all of my characters, even if they were like someone I knew in real life, I would fucking hate them, right?
Right.
Right.
Or we would be at odds with each other, or like be like fighting for like diametrically opposed
Right.
like political outcomes. And I think that there are definitely like moments of grace and empathy for both Powell and Borman in this book, which is not to say that they get redemption arcs or like get off easily, but like it was important to me to show like, or to try to understand by writing it, like,
Mhm.
like why do you do this?
Right.
Right.
why do you keep doing this? And
Right.
it's kind of trippy, you like
Right.
create characters, you create these structures, you put them in these scenarios, and then you do kind of get to a place where you're like, what would this character that I've built do in this situation? Like, what is their motivation? What do they want?
Right.
And you kind of get, it is kind of like an exercise in like compassion for your enemies, but then you also get to like mutilate and punish them. And
We get a little catharsis in
no
there.
spoilers, but
Yeah.
there's
Mhm.
definitely like there's definitely also a little bit of satisfaction of like,
Right. No, I think
Because,
that's really interesting because when you're creating them as characters, you have to anticipate their moves, which makes you have to kind of try to get inside their head in a way.
yeah, no, you totally do. And a lot of genre fiction has a morality that would, sort of, that rewards certain people and like prizes certain people, and to kind of like have, I have a very clear sense of like ethics and like who is wrong and who is right in my work,
Mhm.
and like
Right.
but also like where it gets complicated, and I'm also very aware of like how a lot of people are reading and like expecting who is wrong and who is right,
Yeah.
and like how that's going to like affect the story. So I do like fucking with people.
So when you come on our show, I think you can kind of expect that we are reading it through the lens of sex workers and through sex work politics, and therefore like are on the side of the queer and the trans and the sex working people that are in it. Have you found when you've been talking to like comic book shows or other people that's it's you have to defend that positionality more, or what's your experience been?
God, it's so refreshing. No, I haven't. Like, I mean, I have had, I haven't had to deal with, I'm not going to say that I was like expecting to deal with ignorance.
Yeah.
But like, I don't even know quite what to attribute it to, except to like give, credit where credit's due to people for being, open-minded. And I think that there is something about like the power of storytelling, where when you like put these ideas in the context of something that people can get really like invested in and involved in, like, you know, sort of serialized storytelling wise,
Yeah.
that they just kind of are like, okay, great, like these are the characters and these are what they do, cool.
Yeah.
But
Right.
obviously that's definitely, like, that would be very naive for me to say that that was always true. And comics are a place where there are, you know, put aside sex work, put aside queerness, put aside like sexually explicit material. I mean, there are a lot of comics fans who think that women should not be of any kind, should not be making comics. And
Right.
so,
Right.
you know, and sometimes they're very violent about it, and you know, both violent in the sense of like doxing and
Right.
you know, with Comicsgate, and then sometimes violent in the sense of you know, like harassment and just being like, no one is interested in this, and like the violence of not buying my book, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
no, but the fans, the press, the industry, you know, has all been really receptive and really into it, and you know, I feel really grateful for that. And it's been really nice that like the sex work community and the queer community and the sort of, you know, the like kink and leather and slut cultures that I you know, that are like my like friends and family and comrades and colleagues have also been like, oh cool, I will read a comic, you know.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I will go to a comic book store and like make a pull list, and so it's turned out really well, and I have been I've felt really fortunate in that
Yeah.
regard.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, I wonder, you know, you're talking before how you had to like find ways to have compassion and relate to your antagonists, but it's interesting to think about how maybe some readers who aren't really coming from the positionality of the protagonists, you know, from the positionality of
Yeah.
probably most of our listeners, you know, to this podcast, how maybe, you know, that reading it kind of pushes them into a similar space of having to empathize with, you know, people that they don't typically empathize with.
But that's the trick of storytelling. Like when you give a protagonist subjectivity, then you're reading. I mean, that's like the like magic and seduction, to like use a word that you used earlier of storytelling, is like you identify with the people that the story is like guiding you to identify with,
Right.
and like that's part of why representation matters so much. Is
Right,
that
right.
like, if you have, like, I've spent a lifetime adjusting my identification with characters to like male experiences, for example, or straight experiences, and like you know, some of my favorite films are like ones where I've like had to adjust my identification like with the point of view character, with the protagonist, and obviously sometimes I identify more with the antagonist. I think many of us, you know, are used to being more into
Right.
the like the witch or the evil queen, right? Like
Yeah,
from
right.
childhood. But like, it's a reason that it's so important for people to, you know, and think that that's also part of the magic of having like sex worker characters in like mass entertainment, where like people are seeing us as people, and like it seems so basic, but it's also kind of amazing how you like go through a whole like fictional emotional experience with a character, and then you, who maybe is a sex worker, and then you like meet a sex worker, or you find out someone you know is a sex worker, and you are just like, oh, it's like that person. Have you watched the documentary Disclosure?
No.
It's on
No.
Netflix. It's about like the history of trans
Oh, wow.
representation
Oh, cool.
in film. It's really good. I highly recommend it. And I recommend it to you guys and everyone listening. And there's a scene in it where Jen Richards, who is an amazing actress who is trans, is talking about how when she was coming out to her really close friend who was like an open-minded, like San Francisco, like liberal feminist, and like, you know, her like close friend and so supportive of her, like when she came out to her as trans, her friend said, oh, like Buffalo Bill, right? And like Jen talks about the emotional experience of like even somebody who is like decidedly not ignorant and not hateful and you know, not going to like, not actually going to see her that way. Her only frame of reference for Jen's identity that she was making herself so vulnerable in sharing with her was this horrible, predatory, sick, delusional
right
monster, right? And so, you know, the idea that it, like, if your only sense of like, it's not just about like, oh, I don't know any trans people, and the only trans person that I know from movies.
From Silence of the Lambs, that's what we're referring to?
From Silence of the Lambs.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same...
Goodbye... Yes, the Goodbye Horses character from Silence of the Lambs, who is a serial killer who kills it puts the lotion on its skin.
Right. We actually just watched that movie the other day.
Dude, and classic flawless movie. I love that movie, and I think that and it actually is interesting when you rewatch it that they actually specifically say that Buffalo Bill is not trans.
Yeah,
like that Buffalo Bill is a psychopath whose like psychopathy is definitely like wrapped up in gender, but they like actually like take a moment to say that, but that's not what people remember.
No.
Right.
And I think it still kind of pathologizes like non-normative gender identification, or however we would phrase that. But yeah, they did
100%. And it's super, you know, it's terrifying and it's sensational and it like, yeah, it's like a primal fear, and that's the part that sticks with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but so part of what I'm saying is that like that's not even just about, do you know any trans people? Do you know any out sex workers? Like, do you have any queer people in your life? But like, what are the stories that people have told you? That you have like identified with, that you have enjoyed, that you love? There's something like, even, you know, obviously like having diverse community and having like diverse, like real people in your life is also important. Right. But I think that like storytelling and entertainment and fiction is really important as well. So hopefully safe sex, you know, contributes to, you know, people understanding like the humanity and the struggles of sex workers through like following a group of characters. And it's also not just like one isolated, lonely sex worker who like stands in for like all different kinds of sex workers in all different parts of the industry. It's like a group of friends.
That was one of the things that I liked about it, is that you get a sense of like what sex work community is like.
Totally. That was very intentional and very important to me.
Right. Yeah, because I think that unless you're part of sex work communities, that's not visible, because those aren't the images that are pumped out into the media.
And that's because so much of the images that are pumped out into the media come from people who don't have the experiences that we've had. Right. And they're actually just using sex work as a metaphor, to use the Silence of the Lambs thing again. Like, Buffalo Bill is also just like an invention that's it's not even a metaphor for transness. It's just like, ooh, what would be creepy, right? But then it happens to like use like things that are that like you said, that pathologize and exploit and sensationalize like certain like associations, right? And like with regards to gender and like psychopathy and so like
ultimately people's real experiences, you know, get wrapped up in that what is meant to just kind of be, which, I don't, it really wasn't, I don't think, meant to necessarily be a statement about gender or gender performativity, though I guess a lot of Clarice's plot is about gender.
Totally.
But it kind of appropriates those experiences in the creation of that monster without like really seriously delving into like what those experiences mean to the actual people who experience them.
Totally. And I think that everyone has an instinctive knack for understanding what monsters are allegories for, or like what monsters represent.
Yeah.
Those are like stories that we're told from when we're really young, or like fairy tales, or even like religious stories, like are all sort of about like the balance of good and evil, and who represents good and who represents evil, and listen, like I want to like make the world a better place with this comic, and like change how people think about the things that I care about to be more aligned with how I think and feel about them, because I'm right. But I also like just I don't want people to think that like when people like build something with all of this care towards stuff like representation and empathy, that it means that you kind of just got to suffer through something kind of dry, like
right.
before that's kind of like your homework, or like eating your vegetables or whatever. I mean, I love vegetables, but I feel it's both delicious and nutritious.
Right.
This comic, and I hope that is the experience that people have, because it's like the more delicious it is, the more intrinsically motivated people are to keep eating it.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and I think that is one of the interesting things about it, to like extend that metaphor a little bit. I mean, part of it too is that, because it's about sex and it is sexy, even though it's this dystopian anti-sex future, I think that...
Oh yeah, it's also super horny.
Right, it is. Yes. And that may also lure in, a lot of readers who then, are also connecting, hopefully, with these, sex work politics and other politics that are, embedded in the narrative.
Yeah, I definitely hope so.
We have to wrap up here pretty soon, but I feel like I'd be remiss to let you go without addressing what's going on in the world right now. I mean, you wrote a lot of this plot. Said you've been working on this for 3 years. Our country has become a lot scarier and a lot closer to the near dystopian future that you're imagining, I think, since you started writing this. I mean, we are having disappearances in our country. We're having federal officers, jump out of unmarked vans and pull people off the street. We're having people being denied entry into the country, and we're having, detention centers and all of these really dystopic things happening. I mean, it's hard to even summarize them all because there's so many. And I just wonder, like, what that's been like, doing this kind of work, talking about a dystopic future while, all of these ugly things are unfolding here in the real world right in front of us.
Well, I'm so glad you asked that, and I'm so glad that you gave all of those specific examples. And like, I not to turn it back on you guys, but like, do you guys feel like this has all been happening, and like people are just like waking up to it, or it's like getting more it's like more global news and people are like paying attention, or it's like happening to like a broader population of people, and so folks are taking notice?
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that because my therapist said to me the other day, who, I mean, I have an amazing therapist who is not a sex worker, but
Shout out to therapists.
but who's very like, knows what I do and is very open to that. And I talked to her a lot about, projects we're working on and sex work politics and all kinds of things. And when I was talking to her recently about the state of the world right now, she actually asked me, she said something like, are you frustrated right now because you and your community members have been saying that this is happening and only now people are paying attention to it? And I was like, yes, I am.
Dude, yeah, your therapist fucking nailed it.
Yeah. And she was like, you've been talking about this for the last 3 years. And I was like, I know. And it's like this sort of weird experience to suddenly have, and I mean, this has also been coupled with this, and I'm sure you've gotten this too, like an intense interest from like the media and talking to me and talking to other like public sex workers about what's going on now. And I'm like, suddenly you guys are interested in like what we've been saying for the last, as long as I've been in this world. But yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because I do feel like there's a way, especially like in terms of surveillance and in terms of police brutality and things like that, people within our community have been talking about and have
not just
been
our
feeling.
Community. I mean, people of color, trans people, undocumented people.
Absolutely.
But it's, there have certainly been, lots of groups of people on the margins who have been talking about this, and all of a sudden now it's just like, it does feel like it's becoming more ubiquitous or like more mainstream or something. I'm not even sure how to frame it, but it's encroaching into everybody's lives more.
And I just really hope that, I mean, listen, the answer to your question is that I don't take any pleasure or get any satisfaction from being right about the fucking like horrible direction that the world is heading in. Like, I did mean this book to be like a warning and wake up call, and I did mean this book to be like a tribute to so much of the activist work that others in like our communities and like are the like legacy of sex worker rights movements and intersecting movements like migrant rights and Black Lives Matter and a million other obviously trans rights and related like queer liberation fights, and like I do want this book to demonstrate to people like this is not like shit that I just like observed. Like, my understanding of these things like comes from being in like not only like being in the sex industry, but like having friends and having I know I keep using the word community, but like having, I use that to mean like even beyond people who are my like closest friends who are also sex workers, like feeling like there are comrades that in the like larger global sex worker rights community, and even people who are sex workers who are not necessarily like in a position to like identify politically with their work, but like we have a shared struggle, and we've been like working on ways to provide mutual aid to one another to like figure out like what services do we and our like like fellow strugglers, our comrades need, and like in different countries, in different parts of different countries, in different environments, in different parts of the industry, like what do we need? How can we be there for each other when we have access to other resources? Like how do we allocate that? Like what is the best way for us to survive and thrive? And like I hope that in this sort of like fantasy, little controlled scenario of this science fiction story, that there are like answers for people about what some of those strategies can be. And also like, an awareness of like who are the people who are coming up with the ways to do this. And like, if you're just noticing the struggle now, I promise you, there have been people who have been trying to fucking figure out what to do about it for a lot longer.
Right.
You should be listening to them. And that goes for me too. Like, I obviously like need to be listening to, the people who have come before me, or like if I'm becoming like more aware of, like, I'm white and I have been aware of and trying to participate in anti-racist work and just like leading an anti-racist life for a very long time. But like, like Black Lives Matter is making me more aware of the ways that I benefit from white supremacy, like more and more all the time. And like, I'm really trying to like fucking listen to the people who have been doing that work. And, you know, if I can in my work help them to like reach other people, then that's, you know, in addition to like telling entertaining stories, like that's my agenda.
Yeah. I feel very similarly.
Cool.
Yeah. That was not a profound thing to say, but you said all of the things.
No, it was a good thing to say, and I feel like I'm impressed at your ability to maintain optimism throughout, you know, all of this, throughout the dystopian world.
I don't know how I do it.
Both in fantasy and in the dystopian reality
This
This
book has some optimism, but I did decide on an ending that is not just one of like hope and perseverance. I'll tease that. Speaking of tease and denial, and I wanted to do that because, you know, we deserve sex workers and queers, you know, and everyone else that's represented in this book. Like, we deserve stories with happy endings. We deserve that catharsis. We deserve that support. But we also, like, I like deliberately decided that I like didn't want to do a disservice to the movement for all the reasons that you all just brought up, like to sort of pretend like it could just be solved like that. Like, it's not solved. This is not the story of this is not like a dystopian story of a problem that we solved in the past.
Right.
Like, as the world continues in a, you know, as time keeps on slipping into the future, we're trying to, still figure this shit out. And you know what is, actually, do you know what is a really weird experience of writing dystopian fiction, where I like start thinking about a like not too distant future dystopia in like 2017 that's like, you know, a very like recognizable world that's not like flying cars or we're like all living on Mars or something like that, right? It's like it's like a sort of like uncanny, similar but different San Francisco. And so like to start developing that in 2017 and then to have it be like released, you know, serially in like fall 2019 through spring 2020, and then to have this collection come out in summer 2020. Now I'm working on the next story, like the next like volume, the next story arc. And I'm like, okay, this is a little bit more into that future, but is it like weird to have characters have a dinner party in the future?
Right.
Because what if how are the timelines intersecting now with reality? Because it's like, can I project all of a sudden I'm like writing a future that is also an alternate universe where people in the future can have dinner parties. I mean, I hope that we can have dinner parties again, but you know what I mean? It's like very weird to have this like catastrophic change in the world and to try to decide if I have to incorporate that into my like future storytelling.
Yeah, it's funny.
What is the consequences of this pandemic and how long will it last? And
I even find watching television like a disorienting experience right now because people are doing things that we can never do now. Like go to restaurants and hang out at parties and walk around.
It is so weird. Yes, like watching movies, even if they're like period pieces, I'm like, why are you answering? What? Like, someone's at the door? Well, who is it? Are they wearing a mask?
I'm still like that at the best of times. I'm like,
Like,
why do people
why
come
did you
to
come
doors?
into that house and not wash your damn hands? Yeah,
I mean,
feel
that's always
that.
weird about television. Every time I watch TV, I'm like, who are these people that just show up randomly at people's houses? Do they not have phones? Like, why does this happen like this in TV? But it's particularly weird now.
There's that joke
very
that
weird.
like every 90s sitcom plot line could be solved by owning a cell phone, right? Like
So true. Yeah,
they
horror
had to like
movies, yeah.
reinvent all of the all of sitcom writing after the cell phone because all of the conflicts were based on something that'd be easily solvable if you could just call someone.
It's true, and now you see more and more like people texting in, you know, in like movies and TV that are supposed to be set in contemporary times. It's like you fucking realize like how much of our time we now spend like hunched over our phones because it's like they're trying to tell a story about like how people would communicate just like you know, and just search for something, do everything, and then, you know, you're like seeing the information on a screen. It's very weird.
Yeah, it is weird. Well, it was really fun to talk to you.
Oh, I'm so glad. I had so much fun too. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah,
it was
where
great.
can people buy your comic book and find you?
Totally. So retail's weird right now. But one thing that I can say for sure, and this will be evergreen, is that the best way to get the book is to call your local book or comic book store. I promise you that if they have it in stock, whether they're doing mail order or curbside pickup, like you'll be able to, if you call or email or, you know, contact your local book or comic book store, like everything they're doing right now is trying to like redirect people to how they can actually like get books from them.
Mhm.
So they will find a way to get it to you. If they don't have it in stock, you calling and saying that you're interested in it is actually really helpful to me as the creator and the owner of the IP of this book, because that's one thing that is really great about publishing with Image, is that, you know, I'm really seeing a lot of buying this book supports me more directly than a lot of other times that you can like buy someone's book or support their work that is published by somebody else.
Oh,
So
that's neat to know.
so like when you call your local book or comic book store and tell them that you're interested in this, that lets them know that there is a demand for the book, which means that they're more likely to order more copies, which means that more other people are more likely to discover it themselves. So
Right.
a
Mhm.
quick phone call will both get it for you, help me out, and like help other people discover the book. It is available through our overlords. I think you know who I mean when I say that. And both, you know, for mail order and digitally. So if that is the most accessible to you, I won't discourage you from doing that. And the thing that is really cool about the trade collection, the paperback volume, is that it's available in bookstores as well as comic book stores. So there are some bookstores that
that's
you couldn't
exciting.
get the
Yeah.
single issues from,
Right.
but you will be able to get this. And and so then if you want to find out more about me and my work, my podcast is Wire People Into That. You can listen to that wherever you pod. It's about sex, kink, gender, and love. And if you listen to this show, I have a feeling that you will like Wire People Into That.
I have a feeling
And I'm
too.
on Twitter
In
and
fact, I have a
Instagram.
feeling you probably already listened to Wire People Into
I
That.
think
But if you
there's
don't,
Probably some overlap. Yes, I hope so.
I hope so. Yeah.
But and then I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Tina Horns Ass, TinaHornSass, and my website is tinahorn.net, and that is me.
That was great.
Yeah.
Thanks,
got it down.
Thanks.
Where did I learn to market myself?
Thank you for joining us for yet another episode of the Peep Show podcast. I'm PJ Sage, and you can find me on Twitter at PeachSage.
And I'm Jessie Sage, and you can find me on Twitter at sapiotextual or at jessiesage.com.
We would like to remind you that we have a Patreon account and would appreciate your support. Please visit patreon.com/peepshowpodcast. Our music is courtesy of Joe Kennedy. The show was produced by Jessie and PJ Sage.
Signing off. Have a great week.